Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, I'm Dr. Doreen Downing, and I'm a psychologist and host of the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast. And today, like most of the days that I do host a podcast here, I'll be interviewing someone who admittedly has struggled with speaking anxiety and perhaps has some stories that he will share with you. And in those stories, that's where you, the listener, begins to say, wow, that person understands me. I've been there. And these guests that I invite have had a journey to find their voice. And so that is meant to inspire you also. So today I'll be interviewing Brian Wagstaff. And let me tell you just a little bit about him. He sent me some things I can report about. Since leaving a job in the corporate world with Boeing commercial airplanes 17 years ago, Brian has owned a number of businesses and has been a real estate investor. He has been involved in 5 different network marketing companies, and through all of that, he has hired numerous coaches to help him in his journey. And somewhere along the line, one of them convinced him that he needed to become a coach as well. Yay. I can't wait to hear about that. That idea scared him, of course, and he spent 2 years as a real estate agent to figure out that he hated being an agent and that his calling truly was to help people. And an opportunity to buy the Public Speakers Association was presented to him, and he jumped at the chance to develop his speaking abilities as well as spread his message. And Brian, welcome to the podcast today. And we're looking forward to you sharing your journey and your message.
Oh, well, thanks, Doreen, for having me. And it was fun listening to that introduction. I mean, it's weird coming from the other side and hearing about yourself. And it was like, wow, that's a pretty neat introduction.
Yeah, well, you have had a life and you've had lots of lives, it sounds like, with several, like 17 years in a corporation, and then also just venturing out on your own and then becoming a coach. So you've had a lot of mileage to learn, and
Yeah.
that's what we're here today. So we're starting with anxiety, perhaps, that somehow you had recognized as speaking up in public. And so if you can share some stories or something about your memory of what it was like to be younger before you hit the corporate world, I guess, and also your coaching and your public speaking business, way back when, what would you say are some of the earliest memories you have about your speaking anxiety?
Well, I've done a lot of, like I said, I've done a lot of network marketing, and I was a real estate agent for a while, and it seemed like all of those people or all those different jobs they wanted, or I shouldn't say jobs, or businesses wanted me to talk to people on the phone and cold call. And I found out that I have a lot of call anxiety. So this isn't necessarily related to being on stage or public speaking, but I still think that it applies, because I think a lot of the reluctance for making calls is very similar to being on stage. But in this process, I was meeting with a coach, and I learned, or I figured out that my call anxiety came from when I was 6 or 7 years old. And what happened was my mom told me that I needed to call a lady in our church about something about church, Sunday school, or whatever it was. I'm not exactly sure. but I needed to call this lady who I didn't know very well. And to me, looking back now, 6 or 7 years old, and you have to make a call. I don't know if we can get 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds to make calls. They're so busy texting. But I mean, I wasn't into texting because it wasn't around back then. But my mom wanted me to be able to talk on the phone, and I appreciate that she wanted to teach that to me. But anyway, so I was making this call, and I didn't know what to say. And she said, "Oh, well, just ask for if their mother is there." And so I made the call, and someone, a male voice, got on the phone and answered. And I said, "Is your mother there?" And by how deep his voice was, I knew that I had made a mistake. And he said, "Oh, well, I haven't lived with my mother for 15 years or whatever it was. I don't remember." And then he laughed, and that just crushed me, because I was, he laughed at what I said, and I was like, "Oh no, I made a mistake. That was horrible. Oh, I never want to make calls again." And after that, I had a really hard time calling someone unless I knew exactly what to say when the person picked up. But it was also the fear of not knowing who picked up that caused a lot of anxiety. So anyway, and the coach that was coaching me on this, he said, "Well, is it possible that man, he laughed because it was so cute, that you were so cute?" And that thought had never entered my mind until he brought that up. But I want to go on to another story, and it does.
But before you do,
Okay.
I want to interject here, because your story so far I've done quite a few podcasts. I haven't heard this one about it being call anxiety, and it's not so much about getting up and speaking to a whole room full of people. It's not even about being at a meeting and raising your hand. It's about making a phone call. And that's where anxiety was for you as an adult. And then you traced it back. You remember something that got lodged in your brain. And that's what happens, I think, for, when we look back on our childhoods, that there's an association phone with fright or with humiliation, embarrassment, whatever it was for you at that moment. And it gets lodged in our brain, deep in our brain, that our conscious mind might not even remember. So I'm glad you shared that. I'm glad that, number one, you shared it was an early memory. And a lot of people listening might say, "Well, that's no big deal." But it was for a little 6-year-old boy who's maybe got already some anxiety or nervousness or discomfort about engaging with people. So thank you for sharing that. And
Especially people that I don't know. So I think it's just talking to people that I don't know in general. Once I get to know them, I think it's much easier.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
Because you have pointed to that a couple of times now, people you don't know. What do you think is that about, the people that you don't know?
It's probably not knowing what they're going to ask, or not knowing how I should respond. Wanting to have the right answers, or not wanting to look foolish in front of anybody, whether I know them or not. But I think more, I think that if I don't know them, I'm just meeting them, and first impressions are so important. Oh, if I don't make a good impression, then they might not be my friend. They might not like me.
Oh, that's really, I'm glad you pointed to a couple of possibilities, because I think that is something that anxiety about going into an unknown. In fact, our conversation is a little bit unknown. It's not scripted.
Yes.
We're just having a conversation, and I'm asking you a question about something, and it's not like you have a prepared answer. So I appreciate you thinking out loud about, well, what could be so scary about encountering people that you don't know. And I think it might be something kind of in that hind brain. We don't know who this, like the jungle, we don't know who this animal is in front of us, and it's a human, but We don't know what they're going to think of us, or how do we need to be. We have to make a lot of assessments. So thanks.
But if we hadn't had a one-to-one, a Zoom one-to-one beforehand, and I'd talked to you before, this would have been much harder for me to do. I mean,
Uh-huh.
because you in that one-to-one, you put me at ease. I was like, oh, okay, I can relax.
That's what I
Dr. Doreen is great, and she makes you feel good. And so I'm not nervous talking to you.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. Well, you said you had another story. Let's go.
Yes. So when I was 14 years old, I was excited because I was able to attend a youth conference for my church. You had to be 14 or older, and I just barely turned 14. And so I went to this youth conference where there was about 500 kids. There was a gym full of 500 or so adults and teenagers. And we were having a presentation, and we were supposed to dress nice. We didn't have to wear like a suit and tie, but we needed to dress nice. And so I found a nice shirt, a polo shirt, and then a pair of slacks. And I didn't want to wear the shoes that I would wear on Sunday with my suit. So I was like, okay, I want to wear tennis shoes. And so I was looking through my shoes, and I just bought a pair of football shoes for the upcoming season. They had never been worn, and I was excited about football. So I was like, I think I should wear these football shoes with my nice pants and nice shirt. And I asked my sister what she thought, and she said, "Oh yeah, I think that's fine. Go ahead." And my mom didn't say anything, which was surprising because usually she would say, "Oh no, you have to wear something nicer than that. Those shoes don't go with this outfit." So I'm sitting in the gym, and I'm on the aisle, and the speaker up on the stage, he's asking for a volunteer to come up on stage. And no one volunteered, of course. I mean, we're all teenagers. No one's going to volunteer to go up there. And he points at me and says, "Hey, you wearing the white shoes, come on up here." And I was like, oh, I should have never worn those white shoes. If I was wearing black shoes, he would have never noticed me. And so I got up on stage, and he had a blackboard there, and he said, "I want you to write all of your greatest strengths, your best attributes, all the good things about you. I want you to write those all on the board right now." And I thought, well, I can't do that. I can't write all those things. That would be boasting. And so he pushed me a little bit more. Come on, go ahead and write them all. And I was like, no, I won't do it. And he said, "Why won't you do it?" And I said, "Because I don't want to look like I'm boasting." And I don't remember what happened after that, but eventually I got off the stage, and I didn't write anything on the board, so I didn't have to. He let me go, but I was humiliated. Well, I was just so mad that he brought me up there, and I was not knowing what I was supposed to do. Like, what answer did he want? Was that the answer he was looking for? I don't know. Was he trying to embarrass me? Was he trying to get me to put those things up there so that everyone could look at them? I don't know. But at that time, I thought, okay, I should never wear white shoes with dark pants. And I thought, I never want to be up on stage being asked questions where I don't know the answer to.
Well, there you go again. It's so similar to the other story about being thrust into a situation that you're totally unprepared for, and you have no idea what's being asked of you. And even the answering feels like you can't even take a risk answering the question because it might be wrong, or,
Yeah.
but all in
Either
all,
no matter what I did, I could be wrong.
yes, yeah, no
So,
matter what
oh,
you
I can't win here, so I'm not going to do it.
Uh-huh. And so on one hand, I'm thinking, well, good, brave you for just saying no. You're right. It's kind of
Yeah.
like that coach you talked about who said, well, could it be that the man laughed because it was cute? Well, I'm acknowledging you for saying, I'm not going to play this game. It doesn't feel good to me. It's uncomfortable. I'm going to leave the stage. So I guess that, knowing what works for you and what doesn't work for you. But on the other hand, what we're talking about are incidences that felt like it rattled your body in such a way that you carried anxiety with you forward into being an adult.
Yeah.
You said there was a third story?
Yes. Yeah. So not much later, while I was still 14, I was in a junior high band concert, and the way the music was written, they put in I played trombone, and so there was music written for baritones, and the baritone, they put it in there like that the trombones will play this unless there is a baritone in the band, then the baritone would play it, and so we were practicing it, and sometimes the trombones we would play it because we liked it. It was the fun part of the music, so we would play it with the baritone. And then finally, the day before the concert, our band director, he said, "Okay, trombones, you don't play. We're just gonna have the I think there were two baritones, so we're gonna have the baritones play it, and you guys won't play." So then during the concert, we get to that point in the music, and I stopped playing, and the other four trombones, they kept playing, and they played the part that the band director said not to let the baritones, just the baritones play. And so I was super embarrassed. I was the only one sitting there not playing out of all the other trombones. And I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, should I start playing? Should I just pick up my horn and start playing this other part and try and figure out where they are? And then I just decided, no, I can't do that. I'm just gonna not play. And then after the concert was over, I said to my friends, "Hey, what happened?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we decided to play it. We thought it'd be fun." And the band director, I don't think ever said anything to us like, "Hey, you guys weren't supposed to do that." But in my view, everyone in the entire audience was looking at me like, "Why aren't you playing? You're supposed to be playing." So I was super embarrassed. And I had some other friends that were there at the concert, and I talked to them later and said, "Oh, did you see me? Did you see me do that? Oh, it's horrible."
And so what was their answer? Did they say they did notice that you stood out?
I don't even remember. I don't
I
remember
doubt
what
it,
they.
of course, but I think what you're saying also shows us that you may, if we asked 100 people who were listening, watching, and not a one said they never noticed you, it still matters most of what you were feeling. So, 100 people telling you that they didn't notice would not convince you to feel like you had done something that was embarrassing, because that embarrassment was in the moment for you, and they're trying to say, "Oh, don't be embarrassed," but you're saying, "I was." So I think that's an important point, that other people could try and soothe your feelings, but if you felt it, there's truth in feeling like, "Oh, I'm screwing up here and I don't know," just that kind of fright of, "Ooh, I don't know what I should do. Should I pick it up? Should I play? Should I should I pretend I'm playing?" Yeah, it's those moments of being kind of caught, I guess, and that's seems to be the theme that of the three stories that you're telling me is, that whole deer in the headlights moment that people talk about, where you're just trapped, stuck. All of a sudden,
Yes.
the bright lights are on you,
Hmm.
and you can't escape. That's what it feels like. You can't escape.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I don't know how many people were there at that concert. I don't know, a couple of hundred, 300, I don't know. But it felt like everyone was watching me.
Yeah. And so we can say, of course not, they weren't. However, what you're left with, and what people who have fright or who have anything close to a traumatic moment in their life, what's left is the sensation, the physical sensation of being in the middle of the spotlight trapped, and that you can't get away from it. And that sensation is what lingers in our bodies and in our brains and in our, I think, even at a cellular level. So
Hmm.
here you are, you've got a number of incidences that all seem to add up to the same thing of like, ooh, can't I don't want to, I want out of here, but I can't get out of here and I don't know what to do. And, but somewhere along the line, now we could talk about, well, so what was your journey? I know you had coaching, and how have you been working on overcoming this fright that landed in your body?
Well, I think that number one, the biggest thing is for me to be able to start looking back at these stories and finding them from my past, and say, "Oh, this is where this came from," because I hadn't really thought about those stories until I had coaches ask me about it. And in fact, the one about the band concert, I didn't even remember until, I don't know, half an hour before we started recording. All of a sudden it came to me. It was like, oh, that was another time where you were on the stage and you wanted to be invisible.
Oh, that phrase you just use is so powerful. I just felt it run through my body. You wanted to be invisible.
Yeah.
That seems to be the core of what you're talking about. And I bet anybody who's listening right now is probably going, yeah, they felt that, wanting to be invisible. And yeah, that's true. Here you are, and you can't hide. That was what I was beginning to really sense, is that you can't hide, and yet you want to be invisible, and yet you're standing out like a sore thumb.
Hmm.
So the connecting the dots and acknowledging that there are some roots to anxiety feels like what you're saying has been useful for you to understand yourself
Hmm.
and to gain a deeper awareness, deeper insight on some of the causes of what might still be lingering. And so when you do this, when you do start gathering these moments and making the links and getting the ahas, how does that help ease
Uh,
currently?
okay. Well, I think that there's two important questions that I've had to ask myself after coming to these realizations, or remembering these stories of things that happened. So the first one is, what story am I telling myself about the event that happened? What's the story in my mind? Because the story was, 500 people are looking at me, or 300 people, or whatever it is. All of these people are looking at me and they're thinking about it. Even when the concert was over, in my mind, those people are still thinking, oh, what a great concert, except for that one boy who didn't play his trombone while all the other trombones were playing. That's the story that's going through my mind. All of my friends remember it. All of the, maybe the parents of the other kids are like disappointed. Oh, that concert was terrible because of, this one boy that stood out. Those are the stories that were going through my head. So it's, so what is the story that you're telling yourself? And then what meaning are you putting on that? What's the meaning from that? Um, I guess the meaning I was, oh, you're not a good musician, or, oh, you're not meant to perform in front of people. Oh, you're not meant to be on the stage. Those are the kinds of things or conclusions that I jump to. So I'm learning that, you can't change your past, but you can change the story that you're telling about yourself.
Say that one more time. That's powerful.
You can't change the past, but you can change the story that you're telling yourself.
Yes,
Change the story and change the meaning of the story. The meaning of what meaning are you taking from that event?
that's wonderful. So looking at the story that you're telling, so it's first finding those events, then it's looking at what story you're telling about that event. And then it's well, what meaning does that mean? What does that mean for you? Does that mean that you're a less than human? Does that mean you're not
Yeah.
good at whatever? And then, so that means we must tell different stories. Is that what you're getting to, Brian?
Yes. Yeah. And I had a coach that told me, you can tell yourself whatever story you want, so you might as well make it a good one.
I like that. There's so many times today I want you to repeat that. Say that again.
There are so many stories you can be telling yourself, so you might as well make it a good one.
You might as well make it a good one. Well, I hope
So
everybody
you,
heard that. Yes.
so I guess it's okay to embellish, or make it better than it really was, or I don't know. So that phone call when I was 6 years old, I could have. I mean, now I can look back and say, "Oh, I must have been so cute. I must have been the cutest kid saying the cutest things. I must have been adorable." And I mean, I know, like, my kids, when I would laugh because they were cute, they would say, "What did I do?" And we'd say, "No, nothing. You didn't do anything. It's just that you're so cute." So I don't know, I can change that around in my head and say, "Oh yeah, I can talk to people on the phone because look at how cute I am," or "Look at how cute I was," or "Look at how funny I am," or
Uh-huh. And then what I did with the second story about your being up on stage, I said that was pretty bold for you to refuse to play his game. So what about this third
Mhm.
one that you've just told? What would be a different way of telling that story about being in the band?
Let me see. I was coming up with a new story for that. And the only story that I could come up with was, oh, well, I had a different part than the rest of those trombones. They were, I mean, there's a first trombone, a second trombone, and a third trombone. And sometimes not all three parts are playing at the same time. So I could just,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I was playing third trombone, and the other guys were playing first and second. So the third trombones, they had the, 8 measures off or whatever it is.
Uh-huh. Great. Well, I love having had this conversation with you today, and especially around some of the wisdom messages that you've given about stories and meaning and tell a good story, because we're telling stories all the time anyway, so make it a good one. That's what
Yeah.
that's what I'm walking away with. Anything else, since we're coming to the end, that you want to offer the listeners about overcoming speaking anxiety and finding your voice?
Well, this all reminds me of how I've spent a lot of my life wanting to, or worrying about what other people think of me. And it was my coach that wanted me to become a coach. She's the one that pointed out to me, you worry way too much about what other people think. And that never occurred to me that was a bad thing. And I thought, oh, well, shouldn't I care what my mom and dad think? Shouldn't I care what my kids think of me? And she's like, no, it isn't important what they think. And it reminds me of a quote that I've recently heard, and that is, you can't change. Oh, no, sorry, that was the other one that my other quote. No, this quote is, you wouldn't worry so much about what others think of you if you realized how seldom they do. And that's from Eleanor Roosevelt.
Well, that makes me laugh. And
Well, yeah, I mean,
uh-huh.
those people in those auditoriums or those gyms that I thought were all watching me and laughing, a minute after I was gone, they didn't remember any of that. They weren't thinking about it. I was thinking about it for a couple of days,
Yes, and it
and
sounds like,
I remember it now, and
yes, that's what I was just going to point that out, that today you found that to talk about and share with us. And wonderful. Well, I hate to end because I feel like there's so much more stories and wisdom that you have to offer. So let's continue this conversation at some point, because it feels like what you're doing nowadays is really important. So how do people find you, Brian?
Well, they can find me at the Public Speakers Association website, so publicspeakersassociation.com.
and you're owning that business now, and you're welcoming speakers in. Is that what you're doing?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And in some ways, I think you're helping others find their voice by giving them a platform to come and speak. I know you gave me that one day, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, that's the end of our podcast for today. And I want to thank all the listeners for having gone to Apple Podcast and write these fabulous reviews that you've been doing, as well as giving 5 stars to this podcast, and your comments about how people show up and how they're real and they're authentic and they tell stories that have depth. And the people get, like today, thank you, Brian, for being vulnerable and unzipping and self-disclosing some moments that are embarrassing for you, but also having shown us today how to get through, what a journey to go back and find those moments, but also what a process you can do to empower yourself today by retelling stories so that they are good ones for you, that they make you stronger. Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us today for this episode of Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. Each person during interviews shares what has helped them find their voice. You can learn from these guests and find your voice so you can be confident to speak up and speak out. And remember to download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. We hope you enjoyed the show and will return next time. Until then, goodbye for now.